Hey, it's Scott Petrak with another episode of the Brown Zone Coverage Podcast. We've been waiting for resolution in the Deshaun Watson case to record this training camp preview, but camp opens tomorrow, and arbitrator Sue L. Robinson still hasn't ruled on Deshaun Watson's case as of Tuesday morning. A decision could come at any time, but until it does, the pod must go on. Joining me as always is Dave Chudowsky of the WKYC Morning News. Chud, are you ready for training camp? And how are you doing?
Scott, I'm doing great. I am ready. The question is, are you? You're the one who's out there every single day. So I got to ask you that question.
Yeah, I mean, I got most of my laundry done, so I got shorts and shirts to wear. I got a final round of golf in Monday.
Okay.
Hopefully not the final round of the year, but the final round until at least the Browns have a day off, I think. So, yeah, I'm as ready as I could be. Obviously, this Watson thing is just hanging over everything. And we've been talking about it since he got here, right? I thought we'd know by now, but it doesn't look like we're going to know before the players take the field Wednesday. I think practice starts at 2 o'clock Wednesday. I don't know if we're going to – it doesn't look like we're going to have resolution before then, which is pretty surprising to me.
Well, now that you just said that, it's going to come out tonight because we're taping this on Tuesday morning, so it'll come out tonight now.
There you go.
But you're right though. This morning I was talking with some people at work. I work the early shift, so I already got my day in, and we were talking about training camp starting tomorrow, and someone said, hey, is the decision coming down today? And I just said, I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to sit there and try to pretend I know, because a lot of people thought it was going to be this weekend. I've predicted that it would be on a Friday between 3 and 5, the old Friday news dump.
Yep.
So, yeah, I thought it would have come down by now. And you obviously said you feel the same way. So is there any way to know when it's going to happen? I mean, this really puts the Browns in a tough spot.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think there is a way to know. I mean, at some point, Sue Robinson will give the NFL a heads up, right? It's coming, or she'll just send them the decision, and then it'll start to either the news will leak, or at least the Browns will get an idea. Deshaun Watson's camp will get an idea that something's coming. But from the people I've checked with, that we're not even at that stage yet. So, it doesn't mean it couldn't. You're right. It doesn't mean it couldn't happen later this afternoon. Doesn't mean it couldn't happen Wednesday morning. But it certainly looks like the Browns are going to start training camp without the knowledge of if Deshaun Watson is going to miss time, which we assume he will miss time. We assume he will be suspended. I think all parties are working under that assumption. But the question is, how long will the suspension be? So, you said it puts the Browns in a tough spot, and to some degree it does. I think it puts fans in a tough spot because they want to know, and I think they wanted, obviously they want to know how long the quarterback's going to be out, and it kind of changes the way you feel about the season, right? If he's only out for 4 games, let's say, which seems low to me, but it's not impossible, then I think Browns fans would start talking about the Super Bowl, right? But if it's 10 games, then you start wondering, okay, can the team survive 10 games without their franchise quarterback and still have a chance to go to the playoffs? And it's not out of the question, and we'll talk about that. They got a good running game. They got a good defense. You can win games that way, and maybe maybe get Deshaun Watson back for the stretch run, and that's the difference. But I think the attitude of fans, if not the team, right? The team will try to keep a stiff upper lip, but, in their heart of hearts, they would probably feel the same way as the fans. But the fans' perspective of the season would certainly change depending on the length of the expected suspension. Now, saying that, what I don't think changes, Chud, is how the coaching staff goes about preparing for week 1. Because if the expectation is Watson will be suspended for the start of the season, right? Whether it's 2 games, 4 games, 6 games, 8 games, whatever it is, we're assuming that that's going to start week 1. So therefore, if you're Kevin Stefanski, maybe not day 1 of training camp tomorrow, but at some point you have to focus on getting ready for Carolina September 11th with Jacoby Brissett as your quarterback. So I think you head into camp and say, okay, Jacoby Brissett's got to get the majority of first team snaps at quarterback first team reps at quarterback, especially because during the offseason program, OTAs and minicamp, he did not. Deshaun Watson got all the first team reps, and he got a bunch of the second team reps because the Browns were trying to get him to learn the playbook, and he was coming off a season which he didn't play at all for the Houston Texans. And I don't know if it shifts day one, but at some point, and I would say some point relatively early in camp, I think it needs a shift to Jacoby Brissett getting those reps, at least I would say the bulk of the first team reps, not all of them. I don't think you want to freeze out Deshaun Watson. I think you want to establish him as your leader. You want him to take some first team reps and then probably get other reps maybe after practice or late in practice with rookies or third teamers, whatever it is, so he can try to be as sharp as possible. But you do have to prepare Jacoby Brissett. And then if the suspension turns out to be a short suspension, then you can figure out, okay, how do we get Deshaun Watson ready? But then if it's a long suspension, you need Jacoby Brissett to get as many reps as possible. So I don't think for the Browns' perspective let's plan each practice. I'm not sure not knowing about Deshaun Watson, the length of his suspension on day one is that big a deal. It's more kind of on a macro level where you just want some certainty about, the most important guy on your team.
You bring up two great points, right? So you'll have your eye on reps and how that goes, but yeah, going back to what I said, it puts them in a tough spot. Is that drama factor, Scott?
Yeah.
And how many years? And we've done this a million times, and whether it was on TV or on this pod, or you and I have talked about this over and over. Browns fans do it. It's the drama, and it does weigh in, and it plays a factor because we've seen how many issues this franchise has had in the past, and you just kind of would like to know and just not have to have that in the back of your head, and not even back, front, everywhere. Right. I mean, you just kind of want it over with and know.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair to say, Chud, and I think it's right on the money. And as much as we talk about players having blinders and you focus on what you can control, we know that they're human, and we know that Kevin Stefanski's human, and Andrew Berry. And first of all, I think that period between end of mandatory minicamp and beginning of training camp is really the biggest downtime in the NFL calendar, and that's when guys get away, coaches get away, right? They close the building for part of that time. There's no way Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski enjoyed their break as much as they normally would. Because if I'm consumed by what's going to happen with Deshaun Watson, just from a work perspective, they are, right? And all the contingencies you need to have. And okay, are we going to work out and sign Josh Rosen? Or what are we going to do about Jimmy Garoppolo? Do we hope, could we trade for him? Do we hope he gets cut? Is he our contingency plan if the suspension's a year long? All those things. So I think from a human level, they've been affected greatly, not to mention the off the field and, you're accepting a guy who has this baggage that he brings with him. Just from a football family standpoint, I'm sure they've been affected. And then I think from a player perspective, if you're Myles Garrett, right, he talked about it during the offseason, that his worry is how are they going to win games if Deshaun Watson misses a lot of time, right? And that's real. And I think that's a real concern for a lot of guys on this roster, especially when you look around and they say, hey, this is a big-time roster, right? We think we can win a bunch of games if we have the guy we need at quarterback. And if you take him away, everything changes. So I do think I do think resolution will help. And it will enable everyone to shift the focus to some degree. Now, you have to fight the woe is us if it's a lengthy suspension. How do we do this? And then from a coaching and player perspective, there's going to need to be a shift in philosophy, right? Like if Deshaun Watson misses whatever number of games he misses, the Browns are going to have to win in different ways than if he were quarterback, right? You're going to have to run the game, you run the ball better, run it more. You're going to have to play better defense. You have to probably win low-scoring games, hope your special teams contributes in meaningful ways, which it hasn't in the past, in the recent past. So, there's certainly the fact of not knowing certainly hangs over everything going into training camp. And I also think that the organization probably felt like they would know by now. And by not knowing, I think there is a cloud lingering, and we'll see how the fan reaction is tomorrow, right? Deshaun Watson's practicing. Quarterbacks and rookies started practicing over the weekend. He'll be there practicing Wednesday. Tomorrow, when we show up to watch, fans aren't allowed in until Saturday. But so when fans show up, right? So fans won't be there tomorrow, so we won't get their reaction. But when fans show up Saturday, and let's say we still don't know, I think that will put a damper on how the fans' reaction would be on a normal day one of training camp, which you've seen plenty of times, Chud. The place is electric, right? That might be when the anticipation is as high as it ever is day one of training camp. And it just, I would think it would not have the same feeling if you don't know about Watson's suspension, or if it's a lengthy suspension that we know by then.
Yeah, 3 of the biggest holidays for Browns fans are the NFL draft night, the first day that fans can come to camp, and then that first beer you have tailgating. Those are like the you had mentioned, so fans can start coming on Saturday. I believe it's 11 practices and all fans can attend. So tomorrow being Wednesday is the first practice, but fans won't be there, just to clear that up for everyone if they didn't know. You've kind of touched on it, but why do you think we don't have an answer yet? What do you think's going on as to why it's leaked this far?
Yeah, it's a fair question, Chud. I think number one is it's a really serious legal case. You know, I don't know if the NFL case counts as a legal case, but you know what I'm saying. It's a serious case, and these are serious accusations. So I think that's number one. I don't think Sue Robinson wants to make, and she's a former federal judge. I don't think she wants to rush her decision. I think number two, she's not on the same timeline as the NFL, right? We think of it as, well, the Browns need to know by the first day of training camp. I don't think that matters to her. And we could probably argue whether it should matter to her. But she's trying to make the right decision and the proper ruling. And maybe she feels the need to reread these briefs multiple times. Maybe she's, rereading the testimony from the hearings, whatever it is, rereading the NFL's investigation that took, 15, 16 months, right? So I'm sure it's the NFL's investigation, the paperwork from there is extensive. So I think that's basically it, that she's just working on a separate timeline. I think also, and I heard Jim Donovan say this on the news last night, maybe there's a sense of waiting in the hopes that the league and Deshaun Watson's sides will come to some settlement, so there's not an appeal of her decision, so there's not potential lawsuits, which we've heard if the suspension's a year. There's been a report that Deshaun Watson will sue the league. So maybe she feels like, hey, if we can avoid that at any cost and I can delay, and maybe there's a settlement where, where the league and Deshaun Watson's side can come together and say, okay, we can both live with 8 games. Nobody will appeal. Maybe that's a reason for the delay. So, I think that's it. But I think the main one is she just is not operating within the confines of the rest of us who are so obsessed with the NFL calendar. She's not is concerned with that.
Yeah, I think those are all valid points. So the Browns, as far as news, there hasn't been a ton of late, but, they went out and got Josh Rosen. Thoughts on that? I mean, we're talking about a guy, he was in the same quarterback class with Baker Mayfield and Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen and all those guys, right? There was a lot of people that thought he could be, a superstar quarterback in this league. Hasn't turned out that way. Thoughts on him?
Yeah, I mean, he went number 10 to Arizona, right? So he was behind Baker, Darnold, and Allen way before Lamar, right? 22 picks before Lamar, I think.
Yeah.
I tell you what, Chud, I watched, and I'm not a scout, right? I need to say that every time I start talking about watching film. But I watched a lot of quarterback film before that draft, and I liked Josh Rosen a lot. And I talked to guys that liked him a lot. People in the league. I think I remember talking to Greg Cosell, the NFL Films guy, about Rosen as a quarterback. And on the field, I mean, he throws it well. I remember him throwing it accurately. He's got good size. I think he's 6'4". The problems, which you can't always see on film, seem to be personality-wise. And you heard those rumblings before the draft. And they haven't gone away, or they didn't go away at the start of his career. Now, you talk about quarterbacks getting drafted into bad situations. I mean, he goes to Arizona. They fire the coach after 1 year. The new coach is Cliff Kingsbury, who wants Kyler Murray. So they jettison Josh Rosen and draft Kyler Murray number 1. And Rosen was 3-10 as a rookie, so it's not like he lit it up. But plenty of guys go 3-10 and then get better, right? Nobody's jettisoning Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville. And they had a terrible year last year. So I think that was tough for him. Then he winds up in Miami and plays a little bit and doesn't fare very well. And then they have Tua. So it's been tough for him. And again, I'm not removing any blame from him. He hasn't played well, and his numbers are bad. He's thrown a bunch of interceptions, and his completion percentage is in the 50s. Having said all that, I think when you get a chance at a top 10 pick, regardless of position, but quarterback, everything's magnified, you take that chance and you see if you can salvage his career. And on top of that, I've heard, and I haven't asked Andrew Berry this personally, but I've heard that Andrew Berry liked him. I've heard this for a long time, that Andrew Berry liked him before the draft. So if you have that as in the back of your head, you're like, yeah, let's see if this guy can turn it around, especially when the Browns need another quarterback, right? Because, again, we're working under the assumption Watson's going to be suspended. You can't go into week 1 with just Jacoby Brissett and Josh Dobbs. You need 3 quarterbacks on your roster. One of them can be on the practice squad, but you need a third guy in case there is an emergency. Guy gets hurt Friday in practice. You need somebody that knows the system, right? So that's why you need that third quarterback. And Josh Dobbs has not started a game in the league. He's only thrown 17 passes in the league. I think the Browns want more experience at their backup behind Jacoby Brissett, and Josh Rosen fills that category. So, or that description. So I think those are the reasons you bring him in. And now you don't have hopes that he's going to turn into a franchise quarterback, but maybe the upside is that he turns into a long-term backup for Deshaun Watson, right? I think Jacoby Brissett's only on a 1-year contract. So maybe you find something, or he becomes a trade piece, or you just resurrect his career and he goes on and gets another chance somewhere else. So I think it's a signing with a lot of upside. Now, if Deshaun Watson's suspended for the whole season, then I still think Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski need to reconsider quarterback and say, okay, can we expect to win 10 games, right? Which is going to take at least 10 wins, you would think, to get into the playoffs. Can you win 10 games with Brissett, Rosen, and Dobbs for 17 games? And I would think no, which is why I would keep my eyes open if Jimmy Garoppolo becomes available and you don't have to pay that $25 million contract. If he gets cut by the Niners, then I think if Watson's suspended for a whole year, then I think the Browns might try to bring in a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo. To me, that just makes sense. Now, that's a couple steps down the road, right? You need to know how long Watson's suspended. You need to know if Garoppolo's healthy from the right shoulder injury. You need the Niners to cut him so you don't have to pay that huge salary. But I think these are all things the Browns are thinking about. But in the meantime, you need a third quarterback, minus Deshaun Watson. And I think Josh Rosen is probably as good as anybody. I mean, you could have tried to get a guy like Cam Newton, but does he want to come in knowing that he's not the guy? So I think Rosen kind of fits what the Browns are looking for.
Yeah, the list of guys out there is not much. It's definitely very dry. So the Garoppolo deal is, though, he can be traded, right? And basically what you're implying is if they can't find a trade partner, and then they would cut him. Is that that's the only way the Browns get involved? Because the Browns wouldn't trade for him, right?
Yeah, that's what I've been told, right? That they're not interested in trading for him. I think that the contract, right? Why would you take on this? It's like $25.6 million, I think. Why would you take on that contract when you probably don't need to, right? The Niners have been trying to trade him for a long time, and it's similar to the Baker situation, the Baker Mayfield situation, but Baker's contract is smaller than Garoppolo's. It's not guaranteed, so it's not like the Niners can cut him and save that money. So there's incentive for them to cut Garoppolo. And we saw what the Browns got, right? The Browns got a 5th rounder that can turn into a 4th rounder if he plays 70% of the snaps with Mayfield. So, what do the Niners think they're going to get, right? So I think teams can wait it out. Plus, he's not at 100% with his shoulder, so it's not like he's missing a bunch of practice time. So it just feels to me like it's heading toward the Niners cut him to save the money, and then he gets on the market, and then, do the Browns, if the Browns are interested, maybe they have to compete with Seattle, right? Because we've talked about Seattle's quarterback situation. But I think that is a more likely scenario. I think it's way more likely than the Browns actually trying to trade for Garoppolo. I don't think that's going to happen. But if all these dominoes fall, I would keep that in the back of my mind.
Well, we've talked about it over and over and over and over again for the final time, because you were on vacation and we haven't had a chance to talk about it. They finally were able to trade Baker Mayfield. Just wanted to get your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I think it's bittersweet for the fan base. I think for some fans it's really bitter, and other fans it's more sweet. But I guess my overriding takeaway, Chud, is it's a sad ending, right? Because there was so much for the fan base, because there's so much hope when he was drafted with that number 1 pick in 2018, and the excitement he brought and the attitude he brought, and him, I stood there at the combine in front of him when he said, "I'm the guy to turn that franchise around," right? And then I don't remember if you were there, Chud, but when those Bud Light fridges opened after he beat the Jets on that Thursday night, right? Came off the bench. That place was electric. Downtown was electric. I remember walking to the locker room and hearing the stadium, and it sounded different than maybe every other time I've been at the stadium walking to the locker room, or at least most of the times I've been at the stadium walking to the locker room, besides, maybe when they made the playoffs in 2002, like that kind of atmosphere and energy. And to think, and then 2 years later, right, you get the playoff victory, you end the playoff drought, you get the playoff win in Pittsburgh, and to think that only a year plus later it would be so different, and that the Browns were so eager to get rid of him that they would pay $10.5 million just to trade him. It's really, it's a little bit mind-boggling, right? To see how, at least from public perception and my perception, right? A year ago, I thought they were going to sign Baker to an extension, because that's what you do. Your quarterback wins a playoff game. You expect him to get better. You expect him to get that extension. We saw it, with Kyler Murray and the Cardinals recently, right? But the Browns were always hesitant to do that for a number of reasons, obviously, and they wanted Baker to prove more, and he was unable to do that year, and we can rehash all the injury, whatever. But they weren't sold on him, and a year later, he's in Carolina. So I think it's just another hope for Browns fans that went largely unrealized, and that's tough, and it's tough for the fan base. And then the second part is it adds so much juice to week 1. It's going to be cool, right? I mean, I haven't gotten my official travel memo from work, but I'm expecting to be in Charlotte to see Baker play Jacoby Brissett, and I think that'll be interesting. I think Baker, he acted humble when he had his press conference his first press conference in Carolina. He didn't really say anything inflammatory. I would expect that to change if he's going to be the starter week 1, which I expect him to be. I just can't imagine Baker biting his tongue for the entire week leading up to that game. I think he'll say something, and I think it'll be a really interesting season opener, like they all are, but this one has a lot more juice to it.
Yeah, no doubt. It was a wild ride. I mean, there were times there. I did a story on it. We talked about this before, where I felt, and I've told you this before, that if Baker Mayfield led the Browns to the Super Bowl and won the Super Bowl, I mean, and not just him, but just the quarterback of the Browns, the guy, because we saw how loved Bernie was and is, and I would say the quarterback that leads the Browns to the Super Bowl would be bigger than LeBron James, and I kind of hesitate to say that a little bit because LeBron won a title, but I mean, you know what I mean? I mean, the quarterback position in Cleveland, it's unbelievable. The pressure and what goes along with it. I was looking too at the first week of NFL games, man. There's a lot of good ones. I don't know if you've breezed over that. But you have Russell Wilson playing Seattle on Monday Night Football. Yeah, you got the Browns in Carolina, so the Baker Mayfield, Rams and Rams in week 1 against Buffalo on Thursday Night Football.
Yeah.
I mean, there's week 1, man. There are some. There's a good Sunday night game. It's pretty loaded. So,
Yeah. I mean, one more thing on Baker, Chud. Like, I don't think we can say goodbye to Baker without talking about the inconsistency, right? Played well as a rookie, not well in year 2, well in year 3, or at least the second half of year 3, and then poorly in year 4. And it wasn't only on the field. Like, it was a roller coaster with Baker on and off the field, right? And when things went well, he rode that. He rode that wave. But when things went poorly, I don't think he handled it well. And I think that is part of when the Browns take a step back and look at Baker. I think that was part of it, right? He would get in, kerfuffles with the media, and he would, go on social media and like those kinds of things. And like, I just don't think he handled everything well. And, I think maturity was certainly an issue with him. And I think that's and I think that's a relatively big part of the consistency is a huge part. And I think the immaturity issues were a relatively big part of Baker's story here and the reason he's not here anymore.
Yeah, well, if you listen to, some national media, and even when he came out, that was a big talk about him, was the maturity level. And yeah, you're right. Yeah, it's almost as if he took things too personally too. And the great quarterbacks, like Tom Brady, they just, obviously I went right to the top there,
sure.
But you know what I mean? I mean, the best quarterbacks are the most mature quarterbacks, the ones that learn how to handle the pressure and deal with the media and all that stuff.
Yeah, they figure out a better way to kind of channel that, right? They all have the same, they all hear everything, but some of them channel it much better.
Right. All right. Well, before we go, we got to talk about camp. It obviously opens up on Wednesday. What are the big storylines minus the quarterback, which we just talked about forever? What are the things you're going to be looking for?
Yeah, I did a couple of pieces over the weekend. One was 5 storylines. One was 5 players to watch. You can read everything at brownzone.com. But from a storyline perspective, and you can never remove Watson completely, right? But one of the things I'm really interested to see is how the offense has changed from Kevin Stefanski's first 2 years. Now, I think it would have changed more if Deshaun Watson were going to be, you knew he was going to be the guy week 1, right? Because we know what an athlete he is, what a runner he is. He can run the RPOs. You do a whole lot of stuff with Deshaun Watson. And I think you'll see more 3 receiver sets, probably see more Chubb and Hunt together in the backfield. So some of those things will continue to be different with Jacoby Brissett, right? Like, I think the 3 receiver sets, the Browns are going to do a lot more of that. Now, I don't think the offense will be as wide open and with Brissett as it would be with Watson, right? Because Watson's a prolific passer. He led the league in passing yards in 2020, the last time he played, and Brissett's never approached that. Brissett's more of a game manager. He doesn't throw a lot of interceptions, which I know Kevin Stefanski really appreciates. So, in training camp, I just want to see what it looks like, right? You get to see all the plays that the Browns are going to run, and you see them over and over and over. And, how much do they use the 3 wides? How much do they use the 2 running backs? I want to see how that's changed from Stefanski's first 2 years when we saw a decent amount of fullback. We saw tons of 2 and 3 tight ends. How does that change? And then when we get to the season, how do they go about trying to win games without Watson, with a heavy run game, control passing attack, a big-time defense, special teams? That's something I will continue to watch as we progress into the season. Then you get a couple guys, like the defense, right? I just mentioned it. If you're going to run the ball a bunch, if that's how you're going to win games, at least early in the season, your defense better be lights out. And I don't know how you feel about this, Chud. I'm interested to hear. But this defense, I think, has a chance to take another big step. I thought it took a big step in the second half of last season. It allowed less than 19 points a game over the last 7 games of the year. It took strides, and all the big pieces are back, right? Clowney's back, Garrett's back, Ward's back, Newsom's back. JOK's stepping into year 2. Newsom, the second, is going into year 2. I feel like this defense has a chance to take a jump and will need to take a jump in order for this team to figure out a way to win games without their franchise quarterback. Jack Conkin at right tackle, what's his health? All reports he's coming along well from that torn patellar tendon. Is he ready to go? I would expect he's on the PUP list, which I think would get announced today. Maybe not. Maybe he's ready to go day one of camp, but more likely I would think toward, deeper into camp. But is he ready to go week one? The offensive line and offense missed him greatly last year when he missed a bunch of time he missed time even before the patellar tendon. I think you have to keep an eye on the roster moves, right? We've talked about it. Running back is crowded, and I don't think they're going to keep everybody. I think Ernest Johnson gets traded at some point. So do they get a draft pick back, or do they get a player at a position of need, which could develop through an injury? Or you look at receiver and go, hey, maybe they're receiver short. Can you trade Ernest Johnson for a guy to add depth to the receiver spot? Or defensive tackle, where you just have questions about, do they have the right guys at those two spots? Those are two spots that jump out at me. So I'd keep an eye on trades in those in receiver and D tackle. And then finally, special teams. Again, you're gonna have to manufacture ways to win, assuming Watson's out. And the Browns made a bunch of moves, right? They drafted Cade York high in the 4th round. They signed Jakeem Grant Sr. to be the returner, and they have not had any kind of spark in the return game in 2 or 3 years. And you need that to change. And there's going to be a punter battle. So there's going to be a lot of new faces on special teams, a lot of new key faces. And can they add a spark that will be necessary when you're trying to win games 21-18 or whatever those low-scoring games the Browns may be playing. So those are some of the storylines that jump out at me. How good do you think this defense can be, Chuck?
Well, I think that's the key. I mean, is consistency on defense. And you named all of the stud players they have. You know what I want to see is, and Myles Garrett, did you see he got the 99 rating on Madden, the highest rating you can get? And the reason I bring that up is because the expectations for him, the 1 year you have the helmet situation, then you have the COVID situation. What I want to see is Myles Garrett from day one until week 18, right? I want to see him dominate week in and week out. I want to see him be that guy that you just know with the eye test that is just like not only stats, but just a guy that completely dominates. And you know what I'm talking about, right? There's only a handful of guys that can do that. And
No, you're right. Don't you think? I think we've seen more and more of it, Chud. Maybe not to Aaron Donald level, right? Which is all-time
Good
level.
Call.
But we've seen more and more of it, and I think we started to see more of it in 2020, right? Like that, and it's coming off the suspension, right? I think something changed internally with Myles, but it's probably not where you need it to be, where you'd hope it would be, just because he is such a talent. You always feel like, man, there's more there. Even when he dominates games, man, there's more there the next week. So I'm with you. And even he's a favorite again to win Defensive Player of the Year, right? Hasn't won it yet, but is the favorite. But I think that's a great point. I really do, Chud. I think that's what's missing with him is consistent domination.
Yeah, I want to see him dominate. I want to see Ward stay healthy, right?
Yeah.
You need your best players out there. I want to see him out there every week. And then you want a guy maybe to step up that you weren't expecting to be big, right? And those are the type of things. Consistency, obviously stay healthy, but there's no doubt about it. And the other big thing I want to see too is do you kind of like trying to think of the right word here, because I definitely I'm trying to think of the words. It's not a hot seat by any means, but I am curious to see Kevin Stefanski in his 3rd year, right? Because I mean, you have this amazing first year, and then last year didn't go the way you planned. I think this is a big year for him.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I think it's both ways. If Deshaun Watson plays whatever most of the season, right, 11 games, then it's a big season for Kevin Stefanski. So now you got a big time quarterback. You better go win games with him, right? And your offense better look like a big time offense, because you're not going to be able to blame your quarterback like you could when Mayfield struggled. Now, if Watson doesn't play and the Browns aren't able to figure it out and win games, all of a sudden does Kevin Stefanski become some kind of scapegoat, right? If the wheels come off and they go, 5-12, all of a sudden, do you look at Kevin Stefanski and go, well, I know he didn't have his quarterback, but this roster is really good. Should have been able to win more games. So I'm with you. I do think there is pressure on Stefanski, especially when he wasn't, and it's not only him, but part of it was him, when he wasn't able to follow up the rookie success he had, right? Coach of the year. And there was regression might be too strong, but there's certainly a letdown in year 2. So I think that's a fair point for sure, Chuck.
Yeah. And I just, everyone keeps talking, and you've mentioned it, and, you see it everywhere, that this team has so much talent, and the talent to win now, right? Because that's why it's so important. Like, people say, well, if Watson misses a year, you missed out on this big window where they're ready to win now. I think I need to be shown by this organization. They need to prove that to me. It's one thing to have, Myles Garrett and Chubb and have these great players, but it's another thing to go out there and do it. So that's the big thing for me, is I just want them to go out and prove to me, and prove to Browns fans that they are deserving of having that title of ready to win now type of team.
That's completely fair. And, you try to save time. So, you say stuff like, the playoff caliber roster, which I really believe, right? And I've studied this roster, but that doesn't mean there aren't question marks. And I mentioned receiver, I mentioned D tackle. When you look at tight end, David Njoku's got all the potential in the world. I don't think he's produced enough with that potential. All of a sudden, he's going to be the guy. There's no Austin Hooper anymore. Harrison Bryant's not your starter. David Njoku is the starter. Can he play like that? Can he play like a top 12 tight end and produce, and then can Harrison Bryant be a worthy number 2, right? That's a question. But there's not a lot of questions on this roster. I like their DNs. I like their linebackers. I really like the secondary. I like their offensive line. I love their running backs, right? So, again, last year was the passing game that hurt them. And I guess if it's Jacoby Brissett throwing to Amari Cooper and a bunch of guys, then maybe the passing game will be an issue again, right? And that would fall on Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski for not solving that enough. But I do feel like the roster as a whole compares with pretty much anybody in the league if you have Deshaun Watson, a quarterback. So that's why I think there should be expectations. Like, I do think I do think this roster isn't a place where it can win. I get your point completely. It needs to prove it, but I do feel like it's there. And I do think it's fair to say that when you talk about that window, right? Guys only have so many years in their primes. Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward, Nick Chubb. Then you get guys in the last year of their contracts, like Jadeveon Clowney's only on a 1-year deal. Kareem Hunt's only on a 1-year, is on the last year of his deal. Jack Conkin's in the last year of his deal, where all of a sudden, if that's why you can't just punt on this season, right? If Deshaun Watson's suspended, that's why for the whole season, I think you have to look at every option at quarterback, because I think you need to do all you can to win with the roster you have and with this roster, right? Not thinking about the future, not, when these rookies develop, it's right now, because you don't know if it's going to be the same. And you might not have Clowney. You probably won't have Kareem Hunt. Like, you can go down this list and say, okay, maybe this is the best chance that they have. Not that you can't replace guys, but you know what I mean? I just don't think you can say, well, this year got away from us because we didn't have our quarterback for 8, 10, or 17 games. You just can't have that mindset. And you need to do everything you can, whether that's signing another D tackle because you're worried about Jordan Elliott, or signing another receiver because you're worried about David Bell's foot and or Anthony Schwartz not being able to step up in year 2. Like, those are the issues where I think Andrew Berry, and I understand why he's going to trust some of his draft picks, but you have to do it with some skepticism and be ready to be really aggressive to fill some possible holes that crop up through injuries or lack of performance in training camp in the preseason.
So tomorrow, you've mentioned a lot of the storylines and the key players. What are the, Scott Petrak out at camp tomorrow, first practice, you're the eyes of the fans because fans can't be there. What are the first what are the first two things you're going to look for when you get when the team comes out?
Yeah, it's going to be all about quarterback, Chud.
Yeah.
It's going to be all about quarterback. It's how they're splitting the reps. How does Watson look? Does he look distracted? How are guys kind of, interacting with Watson? When fans show up Saturday, how the fans react to Watson. I think that'll be interesting. I would expect he would be embraced. But you never know, right? We know that there's some people that were not happy with the move. It's going to be a lot about the quarterback early in camp for sure. How does Jacoby Brissett look, right? We have not seen him take a ton of reps. So you need to see him because I think we're going to see him week 1, right? So I've watched him play, but I want to get a better feel for him in person, right? How does he throw the ball? How does it come out of his hand? All those kinds of things. Once we get past the quarterback, I think some guys to watch. I've already mentioned Anthony Schwartz. They're counting on him. He needs to stay healthy, and he needs to show that he's more comfortable at receiver than he was a year ago when he looked like a speed guy that was injured and didn't have his speed. He didn't look natural at receiver. That needs to change because they're counting on him, especially with David Bell starting camp on PUP with the foot injury. There's 2 guys on the O-line, Jedrick Wills Jr. at left tackle. I got a story up on Browns.com. I talked to him at the end of minicamp. I talked to Bill Callahan, the veteran line coach. Callahan said he expects Wills to take a quantum leap. And it's year 3. Wills has been okay, but not great. Maybe not even really good in 2 years. And he's a number 10 overall pick. He needs to play at a higher level, especially if this line is going to meet all the expectations for this line. And the same holds true for Nick Harris. He doesn't have to play at an elite level, but he's stepping into J.C. Tretter's spot. And J.C. Tretter was really good for 5 years with the Browns. And the Browns drafted Harris in the 5th round in 2020 with the idea that he would be the successor, and now he is. And he's got to hold his own. And he's only made 2 starts in the league, and he's got to prove that there's not a drop-off from J.C. Tretter. Jordan Elliott at D-tackle is in the same spot as Anthony Schwartz, but a year older, 3rd-round pick, hasn't had much impact in 2 years. Needs to show up. They're counting on him to step in and be like the number 1 guy in the D-tackle spot. There's Taven Bryan, there's Perrin Winfrey, but like Elliott's the guy right now, and he needs to play like it. And if he doesn't, then you start talking about, okay, do the Browns need to go get a proven veteran there? And then the last thing, Chud, is, rookies. The Browns didn't have a draft pick until the 3rd round, but Martin Emerson Jr., the corner, the Browns like this guy a lot. Love his size. I think he's going to compete with Greedy Williams to be that 3rd corner who will play a lot, right? Because we know offenses go with 3 wides, and Greg Newsom's going to slide inside in the slot. Mm-hmm. And Emerson Jr. has a chance to play on that outside early if he's ready. So he's a guy I'll be paying attention to because I know the coaches like him.
All right. I mean, I'm ready. I know I'm pumped up now. You got me ready.
Well, good. I hope that worked for the fans. Hey, I did want to ask one non-Browns thing, Chud.
Yeah.
And I know you're all over the NFL.
Yeah.
Kyler Murray, that story yesterday did you see it about the contract, the clause in his contract?
I saw the headline. Refresh me on that.
So, he signed this big contract. It's $160 million guaranteed or whatever it is.
Yeah.
This extension. Inside the contract is he must spend 4 interrupted hours a week studying film.
Oh, that's right.
Right?
Yeah. Okay.
And if he doesn't, the Cardinals can void his contract. Now, so you're reading all these opinions about it. And the point is, if they felt the need to put that in his contract, right? Quarterbacks study. There's quarterbacks who I bet who study 4 hours a night.
Yes.
Right? And they're asking him to do 4 hours a week without watching video games, without watching TV, without looking through his phone, right? Like there obviously was something in his first 3 years in the league that they were worried about where they felt the need to put that in there. So it's scary that you commit this kind of money to a guy that bothers you and that you can't trust to do it, right? Don't you think you'd say, hey, Kyler, we need you to have a more disciplined study approach, right? But to put it in a contract where you can void the contract or you can default on the contract, whatever. And then it's going to become public because all these contracts go through the NFL and people see them. It's mind-boggling to me. And it's just, we talk so much about quarterbacks. I just think it's fascinating. And if you're Arizona, it's going to be a story that follows him, right, until he shuts everybody up. And it took this, this kind of happy moment of they locked up their franchise quarterback to, oh my gosh, now they look kind of silly, So I just thought it was a random Monday, before training camp. And I just thought it was a crazy story.
Yeah, that came out yesterday. Yeah. So in my world, I usually catch up on a lot of that stuff, because there is there is a show I listen to, and they've been very hard on that guy, and in the national media, and talking about the exact same things that you just talked about, and why things have not gone well there, and it's a lot of what you just talked about, and that talking about with Baker earlier with the maturity level. So he definitely has. It's amazing how much talent that guy has. But boy, you're right about that. So I can't wait to listen today and catch up on that story. And I'm glad you brought that up, because that is fascinating. It's unbelievable, because it goes back to when we were talking about Tom Brady and all of the greats, like you mentioned, that do 4 hours a night. The greatest quarterbacks have it between the ears, man. Yep. And that's where it is. They know how to prepare. They know how to handle situations, and ultimately, that performance shows up on the field.
Oh, there's no doubt. And, I was never a Kyler Murray guy, and part of that's a height bias, right? I like my quarterbacks bigger. But that's not the only reason. And then when you hear this, it just makes me doubt him. Like, even if you said, okay, he's going to devote himself for the next 3 years, like, if you're not internally motivated to study like that, to prepare like that, then even if you win a Super Bowl, like, I almost feel like at some point you're going to let your guard down, right? And relax. And maybe it would be maybe any success he has over the next 3 years. I mean, he could, right? He could have big time success because he is crazy talented. It's in a different way than some quarterbacks, but he's crazy talented. You feel like it would almost be maybe a one and done thing, a fleeting thing, where guys like Peyton Manning and Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers, right? You don't worry about that. Right, they're playing into their 40s because they love it and because it's what drives them. And it feels silly because it's a 5-paragraph clause, but I can, not having known Kyler Murray at all, now I completely doubt everything about him.
Yeah, right. What a story! Yeah, that's fascinating.
All right, Chud, you ready? I guess we're ready for camp, huh?
You got me fired up. It's like the first day of school tomorrow. Browns are back. Like we said, fans come on Saturday, and then boy, I'll tell you what. Before you know it, we'll be able to talk a little fantasy on here. Yeah, so right, I know it's a great time, right? You never want to see the summer end, but the silver lining is football is back, and it's just it's so much fun for everyone.
No, you got that right. All right. Well, I appreciate it, Chud. And I guess we'll start doing these on a regular basis and start talking about the Browns, huh?
Let's do it. I'm ready.
Sounds great. Thanks, Chud. Thanks, everybody, for listening to another episode of Zone Coverage. And you can read all my work at brownzone.com. Thanks.